Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I am so happy and grateful to have Jean Marie Jobs with us here today, who started her training career in 1998. Jean Marie is a master trainer, having delivered over 10,000 hours of in-person training time. Her experiences ranges from corporate markets in the US to intercultural work in Canada, Holland, Africa, and the Middle East. Jean founded Gap Community Inc., a nonprofit corporation in 1998, and Yellow Marker Inc., consulting and training in 2012, with a vision of bringing character and values to the foreground, personally and professionally. Jean has worked with large organizations such as Disney, ESPN, Microsoft, Interstate Batteries, United Airlines, and BMW in corporate culture and change management. Her specialties include leadership development, mastering mindsets, and communication team building. Jean also serves as at her church, Santa Rosa Christian Church, as an associate pastor. She has been on staff part-time since 1998, as well as 15 years of service as a volunteer law enforcement chaplain, retired in 2015. In 2018, Jean published her first book on leadership, The Art of Feeding Heroes, Leading from Inside Out. She's dedicated to unleashing passion. When people come alive, they bring creativity, enjoyment to their workplaces. Oh, I love that. Developing character, inviting people into their inherent greatness, synergies, relationship in every sector of life, and creating legacy. Each person has the opportunity to choose how they relate to their life, and in doing so, create an intentional mark on their relationships and their communities and their environments. Jean Marie, welcome, and thank you so very much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here.
Got to ask, with over 10,000 hours of in-person training, how was this last year for you of not being able to do the in-person thing?
You know, it was really difficult. It was almost a year ago, actually, right today, maybe, or tomorrow, that we went into shutdown here in Sonoma County. And I had just returned from a trip to Zambia. So I got home from an international trip, I think on the 14th or 15th. And then within a day or two, everything was shut down. And within 48 hours, all the contracts that I had scheduled for the next 6 months got either postponed or canceled. And so it's like going 100 miles an hour and hitting a brick wall. And it was hard. That first 3 or 4 months was just such a huge adjustment for me. And I learned a ton about myself, not all things I really appreciate, but my relationship to control, number one. But it definitely, it was an intervention that I didn't plan on. So
How do you tackle that, Jean? I'm curious because I think that so many people probably ran into that wall in some capacity this last year of having the future kind of preset in whatever capacity, and all of a sudden everything changes and it's gone. So how do you address that? How do you deal with that when that happens?
well, I think in a lot of ways, is the way I dealt with it. I don't know if it was the best way, but I definitely did a good solid month of what I would call, looking back, just depression, where it was really tough to get out of bed, to just do the small things. I would really focus on, okay, what can I be grateful for today? What's the one thing? What's the one thing? And sometimes, the one thing was finding the perfect coconut cupcake in Santa Rosa. I mean, it was literally like, I am hanging on by a thread here, people. And also at the same time, learning not to judge myself for that, because just a human experience, and not be in judgment of it, but like, wow, this is different. This is new, noticing it, being willing to share with people. And then ultimately, I think I came to two different conclusions. One is I, at even in the middle of everything, had the exact same amount of control that I always have had. What I was missing was planning.
Mm.
And it's easy to conflate planning and control. I can schedule my life, and that seems like I have control. But the reality is I don't. I have the same control. I can control myself, my attitude, who I am for people, what I choose to give or not give. That I can control. How, my health, my sleep, those kind of things. And that hasn't changed. So even in the middle of a pandemic, that specific piece didn't change, even though it felt like it did, because I'm a planner, I'm a box checker. So I like that. That feels good to me. And I think the other piece was, at some point, mid to late April last year, I just had to die to everything that I loved in the world of facilitation. And I guess that could sound kind of morbid, but for me, I just got to the place I said, die. Let's just pretend, let's just say never ever again in the history of the world will you get to facilitate in front of a group of people. You just what you love to do the way you love to do it is now dead. So grieve that, mourn that, be with that, and then see what happens. And so I did. I just got there and I spent some time just letting that go, grieving that, mourning that. And even though that probably sounds horrible and depressing, it actually was, it birthed some hope in me. So
Mm,
then I was like, okay, now what? Because what I do isn't who I am. I have a particular methodology that I love, and I certainly love people. And being not in front of people or not, it doesn't change who I am and the way I like to give and what I give. I just have this method, right, that I really like, and I still love it. And as the year went on, I was able to do a couple of in-person trainings, and I have a couple coming up in the next month or so that I'm really looking forward to. But I think that reset for me really helped me stay buoyant as things moved along, and also be with people in whatever they were in. I had a lot of friends that came right out of the gate and they're like, this is great, we're going to recreate our whole lives and reinvention. And I'm sitting here going, what are you even talking about? I can't get there from here, right? um, but then 6 months later they hit the crash. I think we all just, everybody was doing the best they can, right? And so that
yeah.
was my version of the best I could do, was dying and coming back alive again.
I love all that you shared, and there's some things I want to unpack specifically. The distinction between controlling and planning. I'm wondering if we can explore that a little more, because as you're talking about it, I'm thinking of my own life personally and professionally.
Sure.
And it's really interesting because I realize that too. It's funny, as you were talking about that, I just had a flashback to the first time I went skydiving. And the first time I went skydiving, I had the guy as my tandem buddy, who was this person that when we pulled up, this guy was out there talking really crazy and looked like he was bananas. And we all thought, God, we don't want to get stuck with him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm the one that gets stuck with him. And I remember when we're getting geared up and stuff before we go, he's telling me there's not a effing thing that you can control up there. So you just follow my instructions. And I was terrified of this guy. So, okay, whatever. And when you start to free fall, you really do have to let go of control and surrender to something else. And so I bring that up because as you were saying that, I had a flashback to that.
Mm.
And it's true. I realize that I'm often, in some of the moments I've struggled through this whole thing, I've struggled because I've been telling myself, I don't like not being able to control these things. But the truth is, in hearing you talk, is that there's a lot of things that I can still control. I still have that same access to it.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that I've planned and not being able to plan the way I normally would
Yeah,
has been what has been so debilitating at moments for me.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was just hugely helpful for me to come to that reality. And I, like most people, I like to feel like I'm in control. So it's easy to slip into that illusion, if you will, when we can plan our lives and our schedules and our color-coded calendars and all of our engagements and the things that we do on a regular basis. It just gives us the illusion that we've figured it out and we've got it handled. And really, none of that is ever guaranteed. It just seems like it in the moment. It's comforting. It's just comforting. But really, what the only control is I can control myself. And sometimes I do that better than other times. But yeah, that's really where it's at.
For those who have struggled with that control dynamic and planning, how might they be able to retool their mindset to embracing this notion that it's not so much control, it's really about planning for them?
I think, well, for me, I started just asking myself, what do I get to control? And then
Mm,
I would, in a sense, list that the same way I would list a schedule. Like I get to control my attitude towards what's happening today or towards my family or towards people that I'm connected to. I get to control how I take care of my physical health. Am I still going to exercise? Am I going to do anything? Like, it's just that relationship to discipline and personal, uh, taking care of yourself. I get to control, I get to choose what I eat. I get to choose what I intake, whether it's Netflix, books, whatever it is. I really did a lot of breath work during that time, which was hugely, hugely helpful. Just keeping my physical body, like my state, relaxed and calm. And I focused a lot on sleep hygiene, just how am I sleeping? When am I sleeping? How do I get my maximum sleep and really focus on that so that everything else works well? So that to me those are some very specific things that I can control. And then even a little planning, if I was like, I'm going to go for a walk with my girlfriend or meet so-and-so for coffee outside 6 feet apart, that was still something that I could do and that I enjoyed. So it was really just rolling back. I think a lot of it was rolling back the pace as well
Mm.
that I had been running at for so long. I mean, normally I'm on the road at least half the month. And so not being on the road at all was just a huge interruption to that pace. So it was a lot of finding a new rhythm for me, and being with that new rhythm as just as exciting as and important as the other one.
You also mentioned grieving the what if, almost like, what if this
Mhm.
never happens? What if I can never go back? And I've my observation with folks over this last year has been, I think some who have struggled the most, notwithstanding the actual challenges that have come into place, whether it's been on their business, their health, their family's health, whatever it is, have been in almost this kind of, it's been living in this, I can't wait till it goes back to normal.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like this false hope that all of a sudden we're going to wake up one day, we're going to snap out of this and we're going to go back to life before everybody started panic buying toilet paper and then all this happened. And it sounds like for you, that process of actually sitting with the reality that it may not never go back to that was quite, it was a moment, it was this process of grief, but it was actually ended up being quite freeing and
Mhm.
almost maybe liberating.
Yeah, I think so. But I in some ways, I think grieving can be a liberating process, even though, most of us don't enjoy grieving. We don't look for things to grieve. Like, what can I grieve today?
Yeah.
It's painful. And I do think it can be very liberating in the way that I mean, for me, it was acknowledging something that I really loved and missed. And at the same time, almost like giving permission to release that and to be with some new expression, which I needed for me. I needed to just go all the way there to move through. And I think even though it just was extreme, I was thinking there's a samurai saying, "Die before going into battle," and
Mm.
I was thinking about that saying, and I thought, yeah, if you don't die before you go into battle, then you're so busy protecting your life that you probably lose your life, right? And it's a way to maintain like presence and courage. And so I think for me it was similar to that.
Gene, in a previous conversation you and I had, we were talking about your vast experience and working around the world, and you had shared with me a couple stories about Afghanistan and the
Mhm.
impact of that experience. I was hoping you might be able to share some of that here, because what specifically you shared with me was just so impactful, and I think it's such an amazing perspective to offer folks who might not be in those kinds of conditions.
Yeah. There was so much of that. I did 4 years of a project there, different projects. And one of them was helping develop curriculum and then do some facilitation for a women's empowerment project that continued for several years. That was amazing. And meeting women from all walks of life. So we had women that were coming from villages that had traveled for days and days just to come to the center for 2 days of training. And then we had, a member of parliament. We had women that were in the police department, but really being with all these different women in that culture, in varying degrees of adherence to their faith. So some women would be fully burqa'd, some women just the chadar, some, so it was all different. But listening to their stories and the just the strength and resilience of their lives. And one woman just started talking one day about how she had decided to do a school for girls in her home. And it was, she had to keep it a secret. There was Taliban in the neighborhood, obviously looking out for that. In the village that she lived in, no education for girls was permitted. And she just felt she had to do it. And but what was fascinating is I'm asking the women as we start, I'm talking about vision, asking about vision. And in my mind, I'm thinking, gosh, I wonder how this is going to connect or who's going to connect. And she stands up and shares this, and in a very unassuming way she did something that was inherently dangerous and risky and could have easily ended up in her death. And when I asked her, why did you do it, she said, I had to. It wasn't going to get done. And I learned so much about the strength and the power, especially in the circumstances where people feel powerless. Women, especially in that culture, felt powerless and did not have certain types of power, but still exercised a lot of power in their internal strength and courage and resilience. So being able to illuminate that and encourage that, I don't know, it was really very meaningful. The people of Afghanistan, in my experience, extremely hospitable, very generous. I mean, I had wonderful experiences there. Yes, sometimes I was terrified because I look really different from most of the people who live there, so I stood out, and that wasn't always a good thing sometimes. But I was there during several attacks and bombings, and I could hear and feel the effects of what was happening around me multiple times. And I really wouldn't trade it for anything. It was such an incredible, eye-opening experience, and just learning that no matter where I go, people are people. People are in the same conversations internally. And I know we are different in a lot of ways, and that's important, and that also is beautiful. And the way that we're similar is beautiful and important. So people are in these, like, does my life make a difference? Can I make it count? What am I here for? What's my purpose? These are normal human conversations that I've heard literally everywhere I've ever been.
I so appreciate you sharing that. And as a testament to the hospitability and kindness of the Afghan people, I'll share this with you. One of my best friends who I've known since we were probably this high, he's in the military and he was stationed over there, and his unit was actually appointed to help train the Afghan army to replace the US Army as they pulled out. And he's a commanding officer. So one of his first tasks when he gets into a duty point is to go and basically meet up with the I think it's called the position's called the water malik. It's essentially the person who's designated in the village to control the water. And in this particular village, the person who is appointed to that job was somebody who's appointed by the Taliban. And of course, when my friend gets there, the guy's, hostile, because my friend's telling him, hey, you need to do this and blah, blah. And he's all, who do you think you are? You can't come and tell me into my home. And there's no electricity, no indoor plumbing, nothing like that. And my friend, he was sharing the story with me. He had this thought. He said, well, actually, I can tell you what to do. I'm the one with the US military behind me. But he said, he said something similar to what you just said. He said, wait, people are people. And he focused on finding these commonalities with this guy. They started talking about their families and their friends and their faiths. And it turned out that they both had fathers who they were concerned about their health from everything going on. And over the next several months, they started to form a friendship. And one day my friend goes to meet up with him, and he wasn't there. It turned out he had gone into, I think, Kabul is the major city, to see his father. Well, anyways, my friend leaves, not thinking anything, goes back to the army base via Humvee. And several hours later, someone comes in and says, hey, I think the water malik's out in front of the base. So sure enough, they go out there and he's sitting out sitting in the dirt on the base. He was staying far away because an Afghan man approaching the U.S. Army base can be a little. And what had transpired is when my friend had been there and he wasn't there, and he came back and found out, he thought that he had offended my friend, because in his culture, you're supposed to be there to receive somebody who's your friend and offer them food and drink and everything. So he walked 3 hours through the, whatever, to get to the U.S. Army base, to then sit out in front of the U.S. Army base for however long, just to apologize to my friend. And my friend was saying that he came and he sat out there with them, and they sat for the next 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the Afghan desert, in front of the U.S. Army base, in the dirt, talking about their families, talking about their friends. And it's to that point of people being people. And I think one of the tragedies of this last year has been, in the midst of all this, we've done so much to forget sometimes the humanity in all of us, and forget that, gosh, there's these people over here and over there who have they're going through that same inner journey with hope streams and experiences like ours.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about leadership.
Yeah.
Working with big companies like Disney, ESPN, Microsoft, BMW, United Airlines, what are the 2 or 3 things that you see they execute on extremely well in leadership? What could we all learn about leadership from companies like that?
That's a great question. I mean, they're all very, very different. But in my experience, the leadership, the things that are consistent in all those companies, was they're really clear on their vision. What are we here to have happen? And at the same time, there's a level of care about the people. So it's like that both things are happening. So it's like the results and the people are together. I know some organizations, they focus on the results and forget the people. They just churn and burn. And obviously, that's just a reality. I think that organizations that do culture really well are focused on the people and the results, and creating an environment where there's some enjoyment, there's relationship, there's people enjoy coming to work. They can connect the dots between this little piece I'm doing over here and this bigger picture that I'm serving, so that there's also an internal connection to purpose. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want people that are just stamping their time card. You want people that are going to go above and beyond for the customer. And people don't do that unless they feel cared for and connected to a purpose bigger than themselves. And I think great companies do that part really well.
I absolutely love that. And it's so incredible to hear, because I think when we're outside looking in at these big companies that are brand names and household names, it's kind of like that celebrity effect, where when we see somebody on TV or we see an athlete, we think that they must not be human in some way, that they're so different than us, right?
Life perfect, yeah.
Yeah, and that they got it all figured out and they're just doing all these things. They must have like some sort of super serum or something like that. But what I'm hearing is that the super serum that they're doing is they're actually doing the human piece maybe a little bit better than most other companies are, that they're really digging in deep and doubling down on that caring piece.
Yeah, and of course it's different, managers, different leaders are different levels, but yeah, 100%, because I think that everything translates to the bottom line. And this is what gets missed sometimes in any relationship, corporate or personal, is that all the attitudes, all the actions, all the inaction, silences, it all translates to the bottom line. So if you've got people worried about their jobs every day, then their productivity is going to go down, because that's a lot of energy being expended. And any energy that's going somewhere else isn't going towards, hey, this is what I'm here for. And it's easy to get captured right by your thoughts and be in your head about, oh my gosh, I hope I don't get in trouble. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I can't say this. That's a lot of energy. And people aren't going to be creative in that environment, because they're necessarily not going to want to take risks.
I've always been so impressed with every time I've attended Disneyland, and I haven't attended as frequently as I'd have liked to, but
not in the last year anyhow.
Yeah, definitely not last year. I got there, was it in 2019 or 2018? So fairly recently.
Yeah.
But I'm always so impressed when you go through any part of Disneyland. There is not one employee there who's not smiling or who looks like they're unhappy with their job. And what's even more amazing about that is how impeccably clean
Yes.
Disneyland stays. And you think about the volume of people moving through there constantly and the
Oh,
amount of scraps of paper, because everybody gets a little pamphlet when they come in, and the snacks and stuff and the water bottles. And especially in the warm summer days when everybody's grabbing ice cream and water and whatnot, you never see trash on the ground.
yeah. It's
It's
crazy.
incredible.
Yeah.
I remember reading a book one time on Disney, and I was so impressed by this too. They were saying that one of the things that when you got hired into the executive team, or at least in upper leadership, that every single person had to go and spend, I don't know if it was a full day or at least an afternoon in the heat, in the Southern California heat, wearing one of the character costumes.
Mm,
And to walk around and interact. And I don't know if Disney still does as a practice. This was back in Eisner's leadership and before, but they said the purpose of that is to have that linking piece, right, for whoever's on the top to understand what the people at the bottom are doing. And I know Richard Branson from Virgin has talked about doing stuff like that too. He routinely still shows up and does concession stands on the Virgin planes, or
yeah.
those kinds of things, or Spartans on the Virgin ships.
Yeah, I think that's great. And just that willingness to jump in, right? And it's a form of empathy, if you will, right?
Mm.
You're empathizing, you're literally putting yourself in someone else's shoes by performing whatever task or job that they're doing. And you see the world differently when you do that.
That's really interesting. I never considered it that way. That's cool. I like that. Hmm. For those of us, I think one of the things that's been really interesting through this last year, so the time we're recording this is St. Patrick's Day of 2021, and we're now effectively, yeah, as you noted earlier, probably a year into this whole thing here in the US. One of the things that's been really fascinating for me to observe is I feel like there's a lot of people who are looking to become more, or a better, or just become some sort of leader. And I think that is large part stem from realizing that whole dynamic of control and planning that we encountered earlier. Okay, things aren't going to be how I always did, so I need to step up. And maybe leadership for them is being a better family member, a better friend, a better leader in their community, taking more political interest. So I know this is a big, broad, general question, but if you had one go-to leadership suggestion, piece of advice that you could leave listeners and viewers with today, that if they were to really hone in on one leadership skill, that would be the difference that makes a difference down the road, what might that be?
Hmm. Um, I would say really maintaining a learning mindset, being willing to question the things that you've decided that you already know, or the way that you've categorized people, like they're like this or this person's like that, or and maintain an openness to that. So like I'm challenging my own assumptions, even about the people I work with, even about myself, because our assumptions about ourselves are very strong as well. So this assumptions aren't bad or wrong. Some of times they're 100% accurate, and
Mm.
they also can create very specific blind spots. So I'm not going to investigate something that I already know. I can't learn something I already know. So once I've decided I know that, I know Jesse's like this, he's that, he's not that, da, 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 then I'm going to lose my willingness to be present with you. Because even in my listening, as you're talking, I'm going to be, well, that sounds like Jesse. No, that's weird. He doesn't, I don't know what that means. Da, 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 da. And my self-editing and selection comes into play. So I think just that willingness to stay open and about myself so I can hear feedback when it comes my way, but also about other people, because people are dynamic. Um, People can shift and they can change, and there is context for our behaviors. And when we forget that, or we lose sight of that, we really lose that ability to stay connected and to stay learning and continue our growth. And I think most leaders are experts in some field. That's why they're there, right? And I think that's a challenge when you're an expert, is to maintain a learning mindset and be an expert at the same time. So that just navigating that tension.
Gene, we're about at our time. And before I ask my final question, where's the best place for people to find and connect with you online?
Great, thank you. I'm on Instagram at Jean Marie Jobs. I have a YouTube channel, also Jean Marie Jobs. My corporate training is yellowmarker.com, like the color yellow, and then marker like a highlighter, yellowmarker.com. And then my nonprofit is GAP Community, GAP Community.com. So lots of different places.
What are you most excited about? Now we're a year later from the COVID time and looking into the future. What are you most excited about for the future?
One thing I'm most excited about right now is the what how we can redesign our culture or our society, our relationships post or mid, if it never actually fully goes away, this pandemic experience, because it is a shared experience. It's a global shared experience. And I don't know that, at least in my lifetime, I can say that there's anything else that I can point to that's been a global shared experience. And I feel like in a lot of ways that really gives us a huge opportunity to connect with people, to be empathetic, to pay attention to some of the things that this season has really highlighted for all of us. Obviously, some of the issues with society, with justice, with a lot of things there for sure, and also building a base for, listen, we're all actually in this together for real. It doesn't matter if you're in a first world country or a fourth world country. We are all in this same storm, if you will. We're all in different boats, but we're in the same storm together. And how can we navigate this together? So I think I'm excited about that possibility and new ways of people connecting and staying connected and listening and hearing each other with fresh ears.
I love that. Everyone, my goodness, are you going to want to rewatch and re-listen this one? Jean Marie took us on such an incredible journey that covered both personal and professional, that covered humanity and leadership and how both uniquely intersect. We talked about the separation and difference between control and planning. And boy, was that a aha moment for me. How many of us have been struggling with the notion that we can't control, only to realize, perhaps in what Jean shared with us today, or just in our own epiphanies, that it's not so much about control, it's our inability to plan. And perhaps in putting it on control and not plan, we don't want to acknowledge the power that we do have to control, especially when it comes to things like those behaviors, our thoughts, our feelings, and our attitudes. Boy, I'm reminded as we talk about that of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and him discovering that the thing that he can control above all else, even amidst the torture and he endured at the hands of the Nazis, that no one could take away his freedom to choose his attitude. What an
Yes.
important lesson to make relevant again today. And we went from there and looked about the idea of grieving the what if. Gosh, how many of us have spent so much time hoping for normal to return, just waiting to go back. I can't wait to go back. And think about what that statement says. I can't wait. It's like you're in waiting, you're passive, even though life is moving around you, versus allowing yourself permission to just feel what's on your heart, which for many of us, it is some sort of sense of grief. As Jean shared, this has been a very uniquely human experience. In that uniquely human experience, all of us have lost in some capacity, whether it's been the death of a loved one, an end of a relationship, a loss of a sense of safety, a sense of community, a familiarity with jobs and how we would do things, a planning for the family vacation, giving yourself permission to grieve the what if. And then from that, you can birth, as Jean said, some sort of new what could be. What can tomorrow become? What can I create today? And from there, we transitioned to talking about some leadership stuff, looking at the big companies like Disney and United Airlines and ESPN and some of the things that they do uniquely well that separates them from the rest. And it came down to people. They're experts at creating culture and community around, giving their employees not just a job, but a sense of purpose, something that they're willing to go above and beyond day after day for, because they're deeply invested in the vision. For those of us who are listening, who are entrepreneurs, who are running companies, no matter how small or big, this is an incredible opportunity to ask ourselves, how clear am I on my vision? How clear am I on the company's vision? How clear is my team on the company's vision? And are we all united in it? As Jean said, everything, all human behaviors are going to affect the bottom line, for better or worse. And you might just find that in surveying your teams, if there is a disconnect in vision, if you don't have all your people uniquely tied to a greater sense of purpose, if you're not creating a culture, intentionally creating a culture that has a little fun and joy in it, you might be leaving a lot on the table when it comes to your bottom line. Jean Marie, this has been such an incredible time with you. Thank you so very much for sharing as generously as you have today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. We will see you next time, everyone, on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.
Bye.